Did they suppose that their advance guard found a bridge in a box of children's cereal as a prize? Did it come in a McDonald's Happy Meal? Hello, friends. Welcome to Type 56, the story of China's army. I'm Jason Clower. This episode is a special epilogue to what's become a kind of mini-series on the Battle of Bridge 4 during the Sino-Vietnamese War. This is the third and final part. If you haven't watched those two episodes that precede it, go and do that now. Then think twice about whether you want to come back and watch this third one, because this episode is going to be something of an outlier. Today, I'm going to go much deeper than I normally would into the weeds of things like PLA staff work and procedure to help explain a mystery that lies at the root of the Battle of Bridge 4. Namely, why did the PLA get the bridge wrong? And why did no one discover the mistake, despite every opportunity and motive to do so, and send Battalion 2 of the 446th Regiment walking into a buzzsaw with no preparation? So much more than usual. Today is going to be a little bit of a cognitive mind bender, more abstract. I'm going to try to compensate with that by relying more than I normally do on my top secret materials that I have stolen from PLA General Staff Department headquarters. Now, I promised you or threatened you that I'm going deep into the weeds, and so I'm going straight there. No apologies. The Sino-Vietnamese War of 1979 involved what was, for our rough and ready purposes, a two-pronged attack from China into northern Vietnam. We probably all know this. And it's important for later in our story for you to understand that that two-pronged attack came from two different provinces of China. In PLA terms, two different military districts. The military district in Guangxi in the east, that was where the attacks went to places like Hanoi that we're more familiar with and are more often depicted in whatever films or TV we may have seen about the Sino-Vietnamese War. And then there was a Western front where troops coming out of the Kunming military district, Yunnan, in that highland jungle area of Vietnam, which I believe corresponds to the Vietnamese People's Army's Military District 2, that was a sort of secondary theater, more difficult to traverse and fight in. See our upcoming miniseries on the Battle of Dien Bien Phu for that. Wow. For the moment, what I need you to know is that those two fronts were being operated by different military districts of the PLA. Just remember that. We're going to come back to that later. And today our show happens in the Western Front. Okay, now let me burden you with just a little bit more background knowledge that's going to kind of like wash over you for the moment, but we're going to pick it up at the end and you'll see why it was important. Our protagonists in this story, as you know, come from the 446th Regiment of the PLA's 149th Division, which belonged to 50 Corps, which belonged to the Chengdu Military District, Chengdu Junqi in Sichuan. That made them actually distinct from most of the troops fighting on that Western Front, which came out of the Kunming Junqi, the Kunming Military District. Our protagonists in the 149th Division arrived late to the war. I believe it was February 25th that they arrived in theater. Don't quote me on that. About a week after hostilities broke out. And they were there as a kind of second echelon to exploit the victories already won by the first wave of troops. So the 149th arrived in country, and then it was fed quite promptly into the fighting. Specifically, on the 28th, which I think is like their third day in country, at 1 p.m., their divisional headquarters orders their lead regiment, the 446th Regiment, to prepare to lead the divisional attack into Sapa the following morning at 8 a.m. Divisional HQ at the 149th orders the 446th Regiment to march that evening to their jumping off point for the next day's attack, which is a certain Bridge 4. I believe you've heard of it. And that bridge had been captured for them, they were told, by the 39th Division, belonging to 13 Corps, belonging to the Kunming Military District.
Awkward transition to low-quality recording made during international active espionage.
I'm coming to you today incognito from General Staff Headquarters in Beijing. I've infiltrated the place disguised as a visiting protocol officer from the Vietnamese People's Army. And I'm here in the kitchen of the map room, where it just so happens that they've displayed a battle map
from the evening before the Battle of Bridge 4. I will probably be caught and executed. Each time I do this, it brings me closer to discovery and certain death. This shows the situation at about 7 p.m. on February 28th, the night before the battle, about 7 hours before Company 5 blunders over the bridge. What we see here is the advance guard of the 446th Regiment wandering up to the bridge held by the 117th Regiment from the 39th Division that is identified to them mistakenly as Bridge 4. In fact, it's Bridge 3, as we know, and it's still about 3 kilometers away from Bridge 4, where peril awaits. Here we have the advance guard of the 446th. We can tell by this little triangular pennant that it's a battalion-sized element. And behind it is the main body of the 446th Regiment. That's what the little quadrilateral pennant tells us, that it's a regiment. Here is the stupid XO of the 117th. And over here we see all those nasty goodies awaiting the advance element from the 446. When they get to Bridge 4, we have the platoon of Vietnamese tanks. We have the anti-aircraft units being used for direct fire, machine guns, and of course, mortars. Friends, I hope that you appreciate the risks that I take for you. You can show your appreciation in advance to my future widow and orphan son by visiting our Patreon page. Otherwise, just like and subscribe.
We salute the soon-to-be martyred Professor Clower and return to his posthumous valedictory lecture.
At 7 p.m. that night, the 446th, as the lead regiment of their division, linked up as planned with the 39th Division, who told them, in effect, "Welcome to Bridge 4." So the 446th Regiment started making camp, and then they radioed to their divisional headquarters with their map coordinates. Some hours later, perhaps around 11 p.m., divisional headquarters radios back and said, "Hey, wait, those map coordinates you gave us for your current position, are those right? Double check those." Well, 446 had done their nav correctly, and they confirmed, yes, those are our coordinates. And Division said, well, then you're in the wrong place. Those are not the coordinates for Bridge 4. Look at your map and you will see. You, by your own account, are 3 kilometers away from Bridge 4. So pack up your stuff, get on the trail. We don't care if you miss sleep. Just get to where we ordered you, because come what may, at 0800 tomorrow morning, you will cross that start line, and you will lead the division into attack. So the 446 did that. It must have been a huge pain. But at 12:30 a.m., they packed their stuff up, left behind the bridge that they had gotten from the 39th Division, and they marched to the real Bridge 4. And as you know from previous episodes, they jogged right up to that thing with no thought of caution, and they got shot up, because it turned out the real Bridge 4 was not in friendly hands at all. Just like that, without even sending scouts ahead or flankers to their sides, the regiment just walked into the lion's den. Why they did that has never been explained. Why did no one say, hey, wait a minute, if the 39th Division is supposed to be holding our bridge for us, and we're here with the 39th Division at this very bridge, and anyone with a map and a brain is free to notice that this bridge is not the real Bridge 4, then who the hell is in possession of the real Bridge 4? We know it's not the 39th Division because they're standing right here with us at the wrong bridge. So we can infer 2 things about this. First, we know that the 39th Division cannot find its own anus with a spotlight. And 2, whoever is waiting for us at the real Bridge 4, it's not our friends from the 39th Division. And it's probably not Private Gomer Pyle and Sergeant Carter. Who does that leave? So with this mystery going unsolved, a few years ago, a retired divisional staff officer from the 149th Division named Ding Yitang tried to figure out what caused that galactic blunder that cost the PLA over 150 dead and wounded. In what follows, I'm going to tell you first what Ding's solution to the mystery is. Second, I'll tell you about a critic who thinks that Ding is full of baloney. And third, I'll tell you what I think is the real solution to the mystery. Now, in 2014, Ding Yitang published his findings about this mystery. Now, you could say, mystery? What's the mystery? The 39th Division was lazy and or incompetent, and they are 100% culpable because they took the wrong bridge, which was the key to the entire operation for the following day, and then they told their core HQ that they had the right bridge. And with friendly forces like that, who needs Vietnamese enemies to shoot you up? Now, if you say that, you would be right. None of this would ever have happened without the mistake of the 39th Division failing to secure the bridge that was supposed to be the key to the operation. True, that mistake alone did ruin the whole battle plan for the next day, but that did not mean that the 446th Regiment had to just step into an empty elevator shaft without looking and plunge to its death. The 446th knew how to read a map. So did their divisional headquarters, who told them, hey, if your map coordinates are correct, and they were, then you're not done marching yet. Get to the real Bridge 4. But Ding Yitang had been a member of that very divisional staff in the 149th Division, who also failed to ask, hey, since the bridge in our possession is absolutely positively the wrong bridge, do you think we should, tell someone? So I think it was for that reason that Ding wanted to know, okay, what went wrong inside our division? Yes, the 39th were idiots, but we weren't idiots, so how did we screw it up too? Ding's investigation led him to the following conclusion, namely, that it came down to one fateful omission in a single radio report to the 446th Regiment's CO from an unnamed regimental officer with the advanced guard who linked up at the bridge, the wrong bridge, Bridge 3, with the 39th Division. What Ding concluded was that at 7 p.m., as night was falling and the regiment's advance guard was leading the regiment down its assigned route to meet up with an element of the 39th Division who were holding the bridge, one of the officers in the 39th, who is identified as the XO of the 39th Division's 117th Regiment, said, welcome to Bridge 4. We've got it all ready for you. And then Ding said that the unidentified officer from the 446th, whom we'll call the handover officer, that this unidentified handover officer accepted the bridge from the 39th Division. And then he reported to his own regimental HQ, these are my map coordinates. Ding says that fatefully, that handover officer, who is not named, only told the regimental HQ, I'm at the bridge at these coordinates, but he did not say, I'm here at the bridge with the guys from 39th Division. And therefore, Ding concludes, what got transmitted from the regiment up to their divisional HQ was simply this: we are at a bridge with these coordinates, and nothing more. It was a small omission, but Ding concludes it created a screw up, because then at divisional HQ, somebody in the map room said, in effect, oh yeah, those coordinates. Well, there actually is a bridge near there, it's true, but it's not Bridge 4, it's Bridge 3. The bridge that they're at is Bridge 3, and it's close to Bridge 4. It's in the general area, but they're not there yet. They still have to march another 3 clicks, and then they'll actually be at their assigned Bridge 4. See the key disconnect? It's subtle, but what Ding is saying is that Division would have noticed the problem if the guys in the field had told them, hey, we linked up with 39th Division, just like you said, and they handed over this bridge to us, just like you said. Here are the map coordinates. Because then the clever officer in the divisional map room could have said, wait a minute. You're standing there at a bridge with 39th Division right now at those coordinates, and they're telling you that's Bridge 4? No, no, no. Those asshats conquered the wrong bridge. Everyone stop the presses. Our whole operational plan is founded on a lie. So, Ding Yitang says, in PLA protocol, the most negligent responsible party was the unnamed handover officer from the 446th Regiment who accepted the handover of the bridge from that one clown in 39th Division, but then failed to notify his regimental HQ, hey, I've accepted handover of this bridge from the 39th, and instead just told them, hey, here are my coordinates, FYI. Ding says that was a major violation of PLA procedure. Now, I'm just surmising here, but I gather that it's because this handover officer basically signed a hand receipt for a whole freaking bridge on behalf of his regiment. And by doing so, he made his whole regiment responsible for whatever happened to that bridge without even telling his CO. Again, this is my surmise, but maybe it's like me calling my wife and saying, hey, honey, I'm standing outside the bank, but neglecting to say, and I withdrew our life savings in cash, and now I'm standing on a darkened street holding all of it in a paper bag. In any event, Ding's interpretation is that that meant that the 446th Regimental CO never even knew about this bridge handover, never knew that the 39th had been there, and therefore the CO was not responsible for the omission in his report to Divisional HQ. And Division had no way of knowing that someone in the field had conflated Bridge 3 with Bridge 4, and so Division just directed 446 to plod stupidly ahead 3 kilometers and put their Yangju in a blender. So in Ding's investigation, really the buck stops with the advance guard of the 446th Regiment, which must have been 5th Company of 2nd Battalion, which was the very company that got bushwhacked the next day. And specifically, it stopped with this nameless handover officer who signed for the stupid bridge without checking and then never told anyone. Part 2, the critic. This analysis has a critic in an author who goes by the name Wu Haigang, who says it's strange credulity that all of this blame could rest on the unnamed scapegoat in Ding's postmortem, the handover officer who failed to inform the regiment what was really happening. This is a really quick and dirty take on that criticism, but roughly it goes like this. First, if the handover officer didn't tell Regimental HQ, hey, I'm at Bridge 4, which is critical to Ding's analysis, then why did the 446th Regimental HQ think that they were at Bridge 4? Because they did. They absolutely did. Even if that somehow got garbled and omitted from their report to Divisional HQ, the regiment definitely thought that they were at Bridge 4, the real Bridge 4. They specifically intended to bivouac there overnight and then attack across that bridge that they were camped next to in the morning. So Wu says, no, it's not like the 446th Regimental staff was also taken in by this map reading blunder. Sorry. Yes, they could read a map. Yes, they knew their proper coordinates, but they did not put 2 and 2 together when they should have. They thought that they were at Bridge 4 when they were at Bridge 3, and they had every way of knowing the difference. Second, the critic says, it is not possible that this anonymous handover officer failed to tell the regiment, the reason I think that I'm at Bridge 4 is because I was told that by the guys from the 39th Division who conquered it and occupied for us. NFW. The regimental orders for that day specifically directed them to take possession of Bridge 4 from the 39th Division. Everyone from Corps on down fully expected 446 to link up with the 39th Division that day. It's not like Corps or Division forgot that that link up was going to happen. It's not like it just slipped the mind of the regimental commander that that was his most important duty for the whole day to make that link up. Did regiment think that their advance guard was just strolling along on a jolly and they found Bridge 4 there unguarded? Did they suppose that their advance guard found a bridge in a box of children's cereal as a prize? Did it come in a McDonald's Happy Meal? And third, as a friendly amendment to Wu's position, I'm wondering, If we're really supposed to assume with Ding Yitang that the whole regimental staff of the 446th forgot that they were supposed to be linking up with the 39th and it never entered their mind that they got this bridge from the 39th, are we also to believe that they didn't notice any signs around the bridge that 3,000 men had spent at least one night there in a fortified position? Did no one say, wow, look at all the remnants of cook fires and trash pits and latrine slit trenches? Did anyone say, oh, look, that's where machine guns were set up, pointing south toward the Vietnamese? This was clearly occupied by Chinese troops. So these are all good questions, and Wu Haigong has definitely got the old noggin joggin. His first answer is so much time has passed now, we'll never know for sure. Memories have faded, they've been distorted, and he does remark that human nature being what it is, blame for these things does tend to get pushed down onto easy scapegoats who are low enough on the totem pole that they can't defend themselves from blame as well, and away from more powerful people who might close ranks if one of their number is asked too many awkward questions. And maybe those people can even dispense a few favors to inquisitors who don't shine their lights into embarrassing directions. But mostly, Wu is a believer in the extraordinary power of conformity. He figures that very quickly in 13 Corps' chain of command, it became such an entrenched assumption, a kind of bedrock belief that Bridge 4 is in friendly hands, that if you questioned that, you looked like either an idiot or a contrarian. Wu thinks that there must have been numberless people at every level who had powerful doubts that this was wrong, 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 and they said nothing. In fact, Wu thinks that there had to be people who knew for certain that the real Bridge 4 could not possibly be in PLA hands and could only be in enemy hands, but yet they chose to say nothing. Now, on one hand, to me, that sounds severe. It sounds extra cynical. To my mind, it's easier to imagine that a critical mass of people were just so emotionally averse to expressing their doubts that they failed to make effective opposition. But it's very hard for me to imagine an officer, even one, thinking, I know for certain that this is all daylight madness and that we're blithely feeding troops into a meat grinder. But oh well, I washed my hands of it. However, I didn't live through the Cultural Revolution. All of those guys did. And Wu Haigang, if he's anywhere close to my age, was at least raised by two generations of people who were all survivors of the Cultural Revolution. And it may be that with that wisdom in his back pocket, he can easily foresee this kind of miscarriage, and I'm the naive one. In fact, that's probably true. Finally, what do I think happened? Overall, I think Wu Haigang is right to ask the questions that he is. Granted, Ding Yitang is the guy who was there, who knows the people, who's presumably talked to them and looked at whatever documents are available. That is, to whatever extent information is gettable, Ding Yitang is probably the guy who's gotten as much of it as any human mind is ever going to be able to encompass. So he has more information than Wu Haigang, and both of them have way more information than I do. So a little bit of epistemic humility from Jason. But I'm basically on Wu's side. There's so much blame to go around. We can't possibly lodge it on one poor sod. No, not when 39th screwed the pooch the way it did. Not when everybody with a map and a compass and a brain from 446th on up to 13th Corps could easily look and see something was wrong. That dog don't hunt. I think Wu is basically right. And I think I have a couple of other guesses about what happened. One goes back to a thing that I mentioned earlier that just seemed tangential and obscure at the moment. Let me make a quick little insider's excursus on how PLA units are numbered. If you haven't seen our previous episode on classic PLA organization, that would be a good thing to watch. If you have seen it, you know that the PLA was classically organized in triangles of triangles of triangles of triangles. Up to now, we've always looked at the small unit level, pretty much the company on down. But it worked the same way at the level of the battalions, which were formed around 3 rifle companies in the case of the infantry. 3 of these battalions formed the core of a regiment. 3 of these regiments formed the core of a division, and so on up to a corps, or what in Chinese is called a jin. Sometimes in English it's translated as armies. That's not really it, though. A corps is just a group of three very lean PLA divisions of about 10,000 guys each. Okay, everybody knows that. Here's the part you probably don't know.
Janky transition to high quality visual aid.
In the case of the 446th, its sister regiments were the 445th and the 447th. The division that they formed was the 149th. The 149th had two sister divisions, and as you may just begin to be intuiting, those sister divisions were numbered the 148th and the 150th. They form a corps, and in Soviet map symbols, we would mark that this way. Now, if you are a pattern recognition genius, you might already guess that the corps that they form was 50 corps. Because if you're good with numbers and patterns, you might already have begun to notice that not only are the units grouped in threes, they are also numbered in threes, right? Since every corps in the classic PLA had three divisions, and those were all numbered in sequence, all the numbers make sense. The regiments are not numbered randomly. There is a predictable algorithm. Likewise with the number of the divisions and the number of the corps. So let's look at how this would work in the case of 10 corps. 10 corps has three component divisions, numbered 28th, 29th, and 30th. Each of those has three component regiments. In the case of the 28th, those are the 82nd, 3rd, and 84th. In the case of the 30th division, those component regiments are the 88th, 89th, and 90th. Notice how we're doing multiples of three, right? Makes total sense. If each corps in the PLA has three divisions, each division has three regiments, and all the corps, divisions, and regiments are numbered sequentially, then it has to be the case arithmetically that 10 corps divisions will be numbered up to 30, that 30th division's regiments will be numbered up to 90. Okay, so let's see how well you've internalized this, class. Tell me what the regimental pennant numbers are for the regiments of the 82nd Division. Multiply 82 by 3, that should be 246, right? So your regimental pennant numbers will be the 244th, 245th, and 246. So to turn this into a formula, and I have to thank Wu Haigang for spelling this out, if you take any parent division and you multiply its designator by 3, its daughter units will be numbered that number, and that number minus 1, and that number minus 2. So these numbers are not random at all. If you know the regiment, then you can calculate what division it belongs to, and you can calculate what corps it belongs to. And if you know where the corps are homed, then you know where that regiment lives in China. All very logical. Why am I spurging out on this? First, because it's really interesting. I bet you didn't know that. Second, because it should make us go, when we hear about something called the 446th Regiment or the 149th Division operating alongside something so far down the number line as the 39th Division? Friends, when units are operating under their parent units alongside their sister subunits, the numbers should be close. Normally, you'd expect the 446th to be fighting alongside the 445th on one side and the 447th on its other flank. Whenever you see that the numbers don't match and the 446th Regiment is taking a bridge from some bozos in an outfit called the 117th Regiment, that tells you these people don't know each other. Not only do they not know each other, their bosses don't know each other. Not only do their bosses not know each other, their corps commanders don't know each other. So let's go back to that little factoid that I dropped at the beginning and moved on from. The 446th Regiment and its parent division, the 149th, they didn't really belong there. They came from the Tongdu military district. They came from up in Sichuan. This Western Front, this was the show run by the Yunnan military district, the Kunming military district. The poor 149th Division was just there on loan, operating under the command of 13th Corps, whom I would bet anything they didn't know from a hole in the wall, and vice versa. So, taking a little page out of Wu Haigang's book and thinking for a moment about how people really think and not what would be rational for them to think, let's just observe a couple things. First of all, communications between officers under pressure who don't know each other, they're not going to be as good. And if there's some sort of like emotional barrier to voicing doubts when you're not sure what that's going to mean for your future, is that going to be harder with people you know and trust or some strangers from 39th Division? The question answers itself. Furthermore, if you're 39th Division, who don't seem like really impressive minds, and you're holding a bridge for these dudes from some whole other province who are going to come and make the attack in the morning, are you going to be extra careful about making sure that you're handing them the right bridge? Maybe not as careful as if you were giving it to your sister division, and if they got mauled as a result of a mistake that you made with your map reading, you were going to hear about it when you got back to camp. Huh. Yeah. Maybe you would double check those coordinates. Finally, speaking of the way people really think and how they decide what they really will voice and what they'll keep secret, let me bring you back to one other remark that Wu made, namely that thing about stuff rolling downhill and wanting to protect the feelings of people above you or close to you. Friends, I hate to go here because a parent's loss is unimaginable if a father loses a son, especially if a father should lose a son to a mistake that he made. Friends, bonus points to anybody who remembers who the commanding officer of the 446th Regiment was. Cao Tonglian. He was heroic that day. He was a lion. Not only that, he gave his son, Cao Hui, who went across the bridge naked out in the open, riding on the hull of a T-54 with 4 guys and some RPGs to go hunt tanks in the dark. Cao Tonglian sent his son into battle and he lost him that day. Now imagine this. If Ding Yitang's analysis is right, who is the person who is spared the most direct culpability? It's the CEO of the 446th Regiment. Ding Yitang's mysterious, unnamed handover officer shoulders all the blame in Ding's analysis. All the blame that otherwise would take one organizational step up and rest on the shoulders, the weeping, shaking, wrecked shoulders of Colonel Cao Tonglian. Ding Yitang was a divisional staff officer in the 149th. He knew Cao Tonglian. Would you want to be the man who blamed a grieving father and a war hero for the death of his son, another war hero? Friends, if you're Ding Yitang and you work with this man, the grieving Cao Tonglian, if you're a decent person, I bet you would help him feel better. I bet you would help to erase the doubts that keep him up at night. Would you do that? I would do that. Absolutely, I would do that. Friends, I don't mean that Ding Yitang lied. No, no, no. I don't think he did. But I think that Wu Haigang is right. People's reasoning, it can be motivated. It can be motivated by bad things. It can also be motivated by compassion and decency. I think that Ding Yitang found good information, and I bet that he shaded it a little bit. Friends, speaking of grieving relatives, I'm soon to be wiped out by my enemies at the Second Directorate for my gross violations of Chinese national security. If you like this sort of content and you appreciate the peril that I put my own life in and also the welfare of my future widow and orphan son, you might consider going to our Patreon page. But at the very least, please like and subscribe. If you are still watching, thank you. Thank you for being here for this level of rabbit hole spelunking. I appreciate it very much. Friends, this has been Type 56, the story of China's army. I'm Jason Clower, and I cannot wait to talk to you next time.